Welcome to another episode of the Home Matters Show. I'm Kimberly DeVries, your host, and today I'm really excited to introduce Jeff Teichert of Teichert Law. He is a business attorney and going to give us a lot of great information for all of our viewers about how you can protect your assets. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Kim. It's good to be with you.
So glad to have you. You know, I get calls, I get people asking legal questions. I'm a real estate agent and realtor. I can't answer legal questions. I often need to say, you need to talk to an attorney. And so I thought I'll just bring an attorney on and we'll talk to an attorney and get those questions answered. So happy to have you. The first question I want to ask you is, we're talking about asset protection. Why would someone need to protect their real estate asset?
Oh boy, how long do you have? One of the, I'll give you one example that I hope will illustrate the point. Let's suppose you own rental properties like a client of mine does, who I recently did an estate plan for. They own maybe 4 rental properties. Now, let's suppose they go through some financial reverses or medical issues or something like that, and somebody's coming after their properties. Let's suppose somebody falls down the stairs and has a traumatic brain injury in one of these properties. Well, do you want all of those properties to be exposed for the injury that occurred on one property? You know, that's just one example of the kind of things that can happen. And so we go about setting up separate entities for the separate properties as a way of shielding, the whole enterprise, so that if, you're not going to necessarily avoid all liability, but you're going to be able to isolate the liability to the assets that really pertain to it, instead of having everything you've worked your whole life for being exposed because of a liability problem.
Okay, so thank you so much for covering that about if you have rental properties, for example. What if somebody just owns one house? Why would they need to protect that asset? Is there a reason, or talk about that?
Well, there's a variety of different reasons. For example, Medicare can potentially come and take your house. They'll pay for your long-term care and so on, but if the house isn't properly protected, they could come and take it after you're gone. That may be the biggest asset you own in many cases, the most important asset that you would hope to pass on to your children. So that's one reason. Another reason is, let's suppose you're in a high-risk profession. You're a gynecologist or something, and you're worried about a malpractice action. If you haven't properly set things up, potentially all of your personal assets are exposed. If you have an unfortunate incident where you're sued. So there's a variety of liability concerns, and probably longer than we have today to talk about all of them, but.
Okay, great. Those are great examples, because I've talked to people who own multiple properties, and I have talked to a lot of people who just have one profession, like you said, a gynecologist or somebody who has a high risk, and certainly a reason to protect those assets. What exactly, you said we basically set up different entities. What does that mean to the layperson? Like we've talked about why you need to protect your asset. How do you protect your asset? What do you do?
Well, it depends on your situation, and as a lawyer, I'm always going to answer it depends. But an example might be, you may have 4 different duplexes or 4plexes or something like that. You may put each one of those buildings in a separate LLC or corporation. You may use a business trust, depending on what kinds of privacy concerns you might have. So it depends on your situation and your objectives, but the idea is to put them in separate business entities to shield them from liability for whatever other activities you have.
Thank you so much. You mentioned an LLC and you mentioned a trust. Can you tell us real quick the innate differences of those two entities?
Trusts in Utah do have liability protection, which isn't necessarily true everywhere. But the fundamental difference is, a trust is not an entity you register with the state. It is it is a legal entity, and it's where somebody holds assets assets for you as trustee. That person is the trustee and you are the beneficiary. In an estate planning trust, sometimes they're the same person. You are the trustee of your own trust, depending on how we set that up. An LLC is a business entity that we set up and register with the state, and you renew it every year. And there's a number of different hoops you have to jump through to keep that valid. It's not terrible, but anyway, it's an entity you register with the state. A trust is a completely private thing. And so if you have asset privacy concerns, you don't necessarily want people digging to find out everything that you own. Sometimes a trust can be a reason. There's also certain estate planning benefits to trust planning as well.
Very, very good to know. The privacy is on the trust side is what I'm hearing from you. LLC is all public
yes.
record. Very good.
Right.
Good to know.
And you can talk about the same issues estate planning wise when you're talking about probate. For example, a probate is really a lawsuit that your estate files against you for the benefit of all your creditors. And if you don't want a free-for-all after you die, if you die with substantial assets, and having everybody and their dog coming in and making claims, or trying to find out, frankly, what 20-something person is about to inherit a lot of money, and trying to con them into certain things. Trust planning can keep that entire process private, whereas probate planning, it's all going to be on public record. And a lot of people don't like the idea of having all of their private financial information displayed before the public.
Where does somebody go if they want to get a trust set up? Do they need to contact someone like you, an attorney? Can they do it themselves? Talk to me about that. Where can people go? What can they do?
Well, legally, they can do it themselves. I do not recommend that for a couple of reasons. One is it's fairly complicated. I'm amazed by the number of millionaires I've seen choose to do their own estate plan on Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom or something like that. And yet they wouldn't dream of changing their own oil in their car. And that's kind of baffling, but here's a little example. You go on LegalZoom, you set up a trust. Let's suppose it's legally valid. Let's even suppose, which I don't take for granted, that it was exactly the right thing that you needed. And then you don't do any more. None of your financial assets or your real estate gets transferred into the trust because you didn't know you needed to do that. And so your assets aren't properly titled, and what did you get? An expensive stack of paper that's not going to do you any good at the time of your passing, and your family's going to wind up in probate court. And I've seen things like that happen over and over. So I don't recommend that you try this at home or do it yourself. If you have significant assets, or if you have minor children you want to provide for, pony up a little money and do it right.
Good advice. So somebody's interested in getting their assets protected. Let's say they want to put it in a trust. They want to just get everything protected. What's that going to cost them? Upfront investment? Can you give an estimate, roundabout number that somebody can plan on spending?
Yeah, $3,000 to $5,000 for most people. If you have substantial assets, or if your affairs are complicated, it can go up a little bit from there, but most of the ones that I do are between $3,000 and $5,000. I think the most expensive one I've done in the last 3 or 4 years is probably $10,000, and that was unusual.
Good to know. $3,000 to $5,000 sounds like money well worth invest. It sounds like investing in your protection, really. What else would you like to add that I haven't asked you today? Just going to give you the floor and add whatever you want.
Well, just to add the point we were just talking about regarding trust planning, there are ways, depending on how you structure the trust, that you can build asset protection into it during your life. And we use a series of irrevocable trusts to do that if you're in a high-risk profession or something like that. Also, I work a lot with business owners. I've had years of experience as a general counsel. outsource general counsel to sort of middle-sized companies. And we like to do things for those companies, like, let's suppose you own a building. I mean, I at one point represented a paper and packaging company that had a warehouse. We're going to put that company in a separate legal entity from the business, and the company is going to pay rent on that building to the holding company that has the building. And we're going to set it up that way because there are significant asset protection values that go along with having those two portions of the business held in separate entities with separate functions. And depending on what your company looks like, we'll come up with something that makes sense and doesn't create an accounting nightmare for you as well. But a lot of times a person that starts their own business out of their basement or out of their garage, and they're still functioning with the same documents they found online and drafted themselves in the beginning, and finds themselves a millionaire a few years later, still operating on that old structure, they ought to talk to me or somebody like me. You got a lot more at stake now than you did then, and it's probably time to think about that. If you decide to take action toward asset protection when you're already being sued or litigation is hanging over your head, the courts take kind of a dim view of doing asset protection planning at that point. I'm not saying you shouldn't or that it wouldn't work, but it's less powerful than if you do it sort of in the ordinary course of business.
So it's more like a preemptive approach that you suggest. Get it taken care of before the problem comes. And then rather than scrambling while you have a problem, trying to protect.
Right, because the court then looks at it like, oh, you're playing a shell game, you're kind of trying to hide your assets now that you're in trouble. Whereas if you set it up in the beginning when you didn't know you had a problem or what the problem was, they see that as much more, of a business strategy as opposed to, I'm going to cheat the person suing me.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. All great information. For my viewers of the Home Matters Show, if you contact Jeff when you're ready to start your estate planning or your asset protection, he's going to mention that you saw this this interview on the Home Matters Show. He's going to give you either 15% off services or a free consultation. You pick or choose. You get one, not both, but he's going to give you a benefit just because you saw it on the Home Matters Show. Hey, if you need to get a hold of Jeff, you're going to contact him at teichertlaw.com, or you can contact me. I will put you right in contact with Jeff and his team, and they'll be able to set you up with your asset management and cover your asset. Again, Jeff, thank you so much for joining. I'll be talking to you again soon. Y'all have a great day.
I appreciate it, Kim. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity. It's been great.
Thank you. Take care now. We'll talk soon.